Welcome to My Steel Commodity Flux, the podcast where we track the trends, turns, and turbulence shaping global commodity markets. I'm Nikki Fu, Commercial Director at My Steel Global. China's LPG market moved higher from August 14th to 20th, supported by stronger crude oil and international LPG prices. The domestic LPG price rose to 5,843 yuan per ton, up 67 yuan per ton from August 13th, despite increases in both domestic supply and import arrivals, while inventories moved lower. However, the market appears to be facing a different balance, with supply expected to increase further and downstream demand likely to weaken. To have a closer look at what drove the market this week and what could change next week, we're joined by Ibo, lead LPG analyst at My Steel Oilchem. Ibo, welcome back.
Thanks, Nikki. Great to be here.
Let's start with the international market. LPG prices strengthened alongside crude oil during the week, with supply concerns in the Middle East remaining a major factor. How did the geopolitical situation affect international LPG prices?
The unresolved US-Iran standoff and continued closure of the Strait of Hormuz kept supply concerns in focus. Middle Eastern suppliers continued to maintain some LPG exports through ship-to-ship transfers, but the security risk around the strait increased after a tanker was attacked while passing through the area. This raised concerns that Middle Eastern LPG supply could tighten further. At the same time, buyers from India, Japan, and China remained active in the spot market, particularly for September cargoes. The combination of supply uncertainty and active buying supported international prices, with both CP and CFR prices moving higher.
The stronger international market also provided support to China's domestic LPG market, but domestic supply increased as well. How did China's domestic supply-demand balance affect price movements during the week?
China's domestic LPG commodity volumes increased by 0.35 million tons, or 0.78%, to 454,600 tons during the week, while import arrivals increased by 14.2% from the previous week to 555,000 tons. However, downstream consumption remained relatively stable overall, and the increase in supply was not enough to offset demand. Supply still fell short of demand, although the gap narrowed. This continued to support China's LPG prices, while higher international prices and import costs added further upward momentum.
On the downstream side, however, margins did not deteriorate broadly despite higher LPG prices. Alkylation losses narrowed, while PDH remained profitable. How would you assess the current downstream profitability?
Most segments of the LPG industry value chain saw some improvement in profitability during the week. The weekly average alkylation profit was minus 790 yuan per ton, improving by 166 yuan per ton from the previous week. Downstream product prices increased faster than feedstock prices, which helped narrow losses. PDH margins remained profitable overall, supported by strong propylene prices. Import profit margins also improved, with losses narrowing to minus 28 yuan per ton in South China and minus 33 yuan per ton for propane in East China. In summary, higher product prices helped offset part of the increase in feedstock costs.
Inventory movements were also supportive, with both producer and port inventories declining. Does this provide further evidence that China's domestic market remained relatively tight during the week?
That's an interesting point. Producer sample companies recorded a sales-to-production ratio of 101%, while producer inventory fell to 22.72% of capacity. Port inventories declined by 85,800 tons to 2,564.5 thousand tons. Although import arrivals increased during the week, limited incoming supply led to a decline in port inventories. That's in line with the tight domestic supply-demand balance.
But the balance is expected to shift in the coming week. China's domestic LPG supply should continue to increase, while both residential and chemical demand are expected to weaken. What are the main changes to watch on the supply and demand side?
The supply side is expected to expand further. Some producers are scheduled to resume operations, which could push domestic LPG supply to around 467,000 tons. Import arrivals are also expected to increase in the coming week, with total arrivals estimated to be below 600,000 tons if the typhoon affects East China. On the demand side, residential consumption is unlikely to improve significantly, particularly with prices already at relatively high levels. Chemical demand is also expected to decline, with several PDH and butane processing units scheduled for maintenance. With supply increasing and demand weakening, supply is expected to outweigh demand next week.
Given the expected shift in the supply-demand balance, the recent price gains may be difficult to sustain. How do you see China's LPG prices developing in the coming week?
On balance, China's domestic LPG market is expected to weaken, with prices potentially declining by around 30 to 50 yuan per ton. After the recent price increase, buyers are likely to become more cautious at current price levels, which could weigh on prices in the short term. South China may be relatively more resilient given firm international LPG prices and lower import arrivals. For ether-based C4, limited downstream margins could make buyers more cautious as well. Looking ahead, crude oil prices, the pace of supply growth, and the performance of residential and chemical demand will be the main factors to watch.
Ibo, thanks for sharing your insights, and thanks to everyone for tuning in. If you'd like to follow these developments in more detail, the full analysis and data behind today's discussion are available through MySteel Oilchem's latest China LPG Market Weekly Report. For more information, please visit mysteel.net or contact us at inquiries@mysteel.com. Thanks for listening to MySteel Commodity Flux. If you found today's episode helpful, be sure to subscribe for more analysis on global commodity markets. Until next time, keep tracking the flows.